I'm Brendan, 34, living in Chicago with a career in IT that took off faster than I expected. For 5 years, I faithfully paid my parents' mortgage, nearly $150,000 total, only to watch them gift the house to my sister as a wedding present. When they suddenly wanted to move into my vacation home 2 months later, I refused. Then came that surreal moment when my phone rang and a police officer was on the other end. If you've ever felt betrayed by the very people who should have your back, stick around. Let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll tell you how this family nightmare unfolded. Let me paint you a clearer picture of my family. My father, Roy, is 62 years old, a hard-working man who spent most of his career in manufacturing. My mother, Linda, 59, worked part-time as a receptionist at a local dental office. Then there's my younger sister, Amanda, 29, who always had a knack for getting whatever she wanted. We grew up in a modest house in the suburbs of Portland, a 3-bedroom ranch-style home my parents purchased 20 years ago. Growing up, money was always tight. My parents weren't financially savvy, often living paycheck to paycheck despite their best efforts. They took out a substantial mortgage for our home, which became the center of our family life. The house wasn't fancy by any means, but it was in a decent neighborhood with good schools, which I'm grateful for. After high school, I was lucky enough to receive a partial scholarship to MIT for computer science. The rest I covered through student loans and working part-time. Those were tough years, eating ramen and pulling all-nighters, but I knew education was my ticket to financial stability. I graduated with honors and quickly secured a job at a promising tech startup in Chicago. Through dedication and countless late nights, I climbed the corporate ladder faster than I anticipated. By the time I was 30, I had been promoted to technical director at a respected software company, overseeing a team of 25 developers and earning a comfortable 6-figure salary. I wasn't wealthy by any means, but I was financially secure and had even managed to purchase a small vacation house on the Oregon coast, a place I'd visit to decompress from the high-stress environment of my job. Everything changed 5 years ago. My father called me one evening, his voice trembling, as he explained that his manufacturing plant was closing due to overseas competition. At 62, he was laid off with a paltry severance package that wouldn't even cover 3 months of expenses. My mother's part-time job couldn't sustain their bills, and they were facing the very real possibility of foreclosure. I still remember the sleepless night after that call. I had my own financial obligations, student loans that still totaled over $70,000 and a mortgage on my primary residence in Chicago. But I couldn't bear the thought of my parents losing their home. The next morning, I made the decision that would later come back to haunt me. I called my parents and offered to cover their $2,500 monthly mortgage payment until my father found another job. They were reluctant at first, but I insisted. What was intended as a temporary arrangement stretched into months, then years. My father struggled to find new employment at his age, eventually settling for a part-time job at a hardware store that paid barely above minimum wage. For 5 years, I sent $2,500 every month without fail. This wasn't pocket change for me. It required sacrifices. I postponed my own financial goals, cut back on retirement savings, and limited my social life. But I never complained, because that's what family does. We help each other through tough times. During those 5 years, I maintained a close relationship with my parents. I'd fly back to Portland every few months, help with house repairs, and even paid for additional expenses that cropped up, like a new water heater and roof repairs. My parents were appreciative, at least verbally, often telling me how blessed they were to have such a devoted son. Meanwhile, my sister Amanda took a different path. She dropped out of community college after 2 semesters, claiming it wasn't the right fit. She bounced between retail jobs, never staying in one place long enough to build a career. Despite her lack of financial stability, Amanda maintained an expensive lifestyle, frequently posting photos of restaurant meals, new clothes, and weekend getaways on social media. Our parents never pushed Amanda to contribute financially or to develop more responsibility. When she moved back home at 25 after breaking up with a boyfriend, they welcomed her with open arms, charging her minimal rent that didn't even cover the additional utilities her presence incurred. I never objected, believing that families should support each other, though I sometimes wondered if the stark difference in expectations between us was fair. Little did I know that my generosity would set the stage for one of the most painful betrayals of my life. About a year ago, Amanda started dating Marcus Russell, a 35-year-old real estate broker, with a reputation for handling high-end properties in Portland's most affluent neighborhoods. I first met him at a family dinner my parents hosted ostensibly to introduce the new man in Amanda's life. Marcus arrived in a brand new Audi, dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my father's monthly salary. From the moment he walked in, he dominated the conversation, sharing stories about celebrity clients, expensive property deals, and name-dropping at every opportunity. While my parents seemed impressed, hanging on his every word, something about him set my teeth on edge. When Marcus excused himself to take a phone call, my mother whispered excitedly, "Isn't he wonderful? So successful?" I nodded politely but felt an uneasiness I couldn't quite explain. Perhaps it was the way his smile never reached his eyes, or how he subtly corrected my father's pronunciation of a wine name, but my instincts were screaming caution. Later that evening, while helping my father grill steaks on the patio, Marcus cornered me with questions about my career. When I explained my role as technical director, he responded with a dismissive wave. "Tech is so volatile these days. Real estate is where the real money is. I closed a deal last month that netted me more commission than most tech guys make in a year." I chose not to point out that if he was truly as successful as he claimed, he wouldn't feel the need to compare incomes with someone he'd just met. Instead, I asked how he and Amanda had met. "At Meridian Club," he replied, referring to one of Portland's most exclusive social venues. I was surprised to see someone like her there, honestly. She stood out. The implication was clear. Amanda, with her retail job and modest background, didn't belong in his world. Yet he'd chosen her anyway, as if doing her a favor. 6 months into their relationship, Amanda called a family meeting to announce their engagement. My parents' small living room was decorated with champagne glasses and congratulatory banners. Amanda's face glowed with excitement as she flashed a diamond ring that looked disproportionately large on her slender finger. "We're getting married in 3 months," she squealed while Marcus stood beside her, arm possessively around her waist. "Marcus knows the perfect venue, and we've already secured it with a deposit." My parents erupted in excitement, my mother already discussing dress options, while my father shook Marcus's hand repeatedly. I offered congratulations too, but internally wondered about the rushed timeline. 6 months seemed incredibly fast, especially given Amanda's history of impulsive decisions. After dinner, I managed to catch Amanda alone in the kitchen. "Are you sure about this? You haven't known him that long," I ventured carefully. Her expression immediately hardened. "Don't start, Brendan. Just because you're still single and married to your job doesn't mean everyone wants that life." "I'm not saying that. I just want to make sure he treats you right. Has he discussed finances, future plans? These are important." "Stop it," she hissed. "You're jealous. You've always been jealous when good things happen to me. Marcus is successful, he loves me, and we're going to have an amazing life together." My attempts to have a rational conversation were clearly futile. Later that night, as I was leaving, Marcus approached me in the driveway. "Your sister tells me you're concerned," he said smoothly. "I assure you, I can provide Amanda with everything she deserves, perhaps more than she's accustomed to given her background." Again, that subtle dig at my family's socioeconomic status. "My concerns aren't about money, Marcus. It's about compatibility, shared values, taking time to really know each other." He chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. How quaint. "Well, Amanda and I understand each other perfectly. I suggest you get on board with the wedding plans. Your sister is very excited, and it would be a shame if your concerns dampened her happiness." The wedding preparations quickly spiraled into an extravagant affair. The venue Marcus had chosen was a historic mansion with manicured gardens where the rental fee alone was over $30,000. Amanda selected a designer gown, ordered custom invitations, and insisted on premium catering. My parents were clearly struggling with the costs. One evening, I overheard my father on the phone with their bank inquiring about a personal loan. When I questioned them about it, my mother admitted they were borrowing $15,000 to contribute to the wedding. "You can't be serious," I said, stunned. "You're still not financially stable. I'm still paying your mortgage. Taking on additional debt is the last thing you should be doing. It's Amanda's special day, my mother replied defensively. We want it to be perfect. I can help if you need money for the wedding, I offered. You don't need to take on debt. My father shook his head proudly. We appreciate all you do, son, but we want to contribute to our daughter's wedding ourselves. It's important to us. I recognized the stubborn set of my father's jaw, and knew arguing would be pointless. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus was pushing for a wedding far beyond what my family could afford, perhaps to impress his wealthy friends and business associates. As the wedding date approached, the dynamic between our families became increasingly clear. Marcus's parents, both successful attorneys living in Seattle's most exclusive neighborhood, barely acknowledged my parents during planning meetings. They referred to our family home as quaint and charming, in tones that suggested they meant small and outdated. Through it all, Amanda seemed oblivious, caught up in the whirlwind of becoming Mrs. Russell and entering the social circle she had always aspired to join. And my parents, eager to see their daughter happy, and perhaps impressed by the lifestyle Marcus represented, continued to empty their savings and take on debt for a wedding that felt more like a status symbol than a celebration of love. 1 month before the wedding, my parents invited me over for a family dinner. Nothing fancy, my mother said on the phone. Just the 4 of us, like old times. Something in her tone made me suspicious, but I agreed to drive over after work. The table was set with their best china, and my mother had prepared all my favorite dishes: pot roast garlic, mashed potatoes, and apple pie for dessert. My father seemed unusually nervous, repeatedly checking his watch and refilling his wine glass. Amanda was conspicuously absent. After dinner, my father cleared his throat. Son, we wanted to talk to you about something important. Your mother and I have been discussing what to give Amanda and Marcus for a wedding present. I nodded, assuming they were going to ask for financial advice, or perhaps help with purchasing something beyond their budget. What came next blindsided me completely. We've decided to give them our house, my mother announced, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. We're signing over the deed to them as a wedding gift. The words hit me like a physical blow. For several seconds I couldn't speak, convinced I had misheard. You're giving them your house. The house I've been paying the mortgage on for the past 5 years. My father shifted uncomfortably. We know it's unusual, but Amanda and Marcus are starting their life together. They'll need a place to live. Marcus owns a condo downtown. I pointed out, my voice rising. And he's supposedly a successful real estate broker. Why would they need your house? It's not about need, my mother said. It's about giving our daughter something meaningful, something that says we support her marriage. And what about the $150,000 I've contributed over the past 5 years? Did that mean nothing I could feel? Heat rising to my face, my hands trembling slightly with suppressed anger. My father had the grace to look ashamed. Of course, we appreciate everything you've done, Brendan, but that was to help us in a difficult time, not to give you ownership of our home. I never claimed ownership, I exclaimed. But I've been making your mortgage payments with the understanding that I was helping to secure your future, not funding a gift for Amanda and her husband, who by all accounts doesn't need financial assistance. My mother's expression hardened. Amanda is starting a family. They'll need the space more than we will. Marcus has plans to renovate and expand the property. And where will you live? I demanded. We're looking at apartments in the city, my father explained. Something smaller, easier to maintain at our age. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So you're giving away a nearly paid-off house to move into a rental that will probably cost more monthly than your current mortgage. How does that make financial sense? Before either could respond, the front door opened and Amanda walked in with Marcus. Their timing was so perfect it was obviously planned. Did you tell him? Amanda asked excitedly, not even bothering with a greeting. My mother nodded, attempting a smile. We just did. Amanda rushed over to hug our parents. Isn't it wonderful Marcus already has the renovation plans drawn up? Wait until you see what we're going to do with the place. Marcus extended his hand to me. We're very grateful for your parents' generosity. Family property passing to the next generation. It's a beautiful tradition. I ignored his outstretched hand. This isn't a family estate being passed down through generations. This is a house my parents still owe money on money that I've been providing for years. Marcus's smile didn't falter, but his eyes hardened. Ah yes, Amanda mentioned you've been helping out. Very commendable. But your parents have made their decision. I turned back to my parents. Is this really what you want, to give away your most valuable asset to a man you've known for less than a year? Don't speak about Marcus that way, Amanda snapped. He's going to be your brother-in-law. My father stood up. The decision is made, Brendan. The papers are already drawn up. We're signing everything over next week. I looked at each of their faces, my father's stubborn determination, my mother's forced enthusiasm, Amanda's triumphant smile, and Marcus's smug satisfaction. In that moment, I felt like a stranger in my childhood home. Every payment I'd made, every sacrifice, every time I'd put my own financial future on hold, it had meant nothing to them. Without another word, I grabbed my jacket and car keys. Brendan, don't leave like this, my mother called after me. I think I've contributed enough to this family, I replied coldly, financially and otherwise. Good luck with your new living arrangements. As I slammed the door behind me, I heard Marcus say, He'll come around. Family always does. The confidence in his voice only fueled my anger. That night, I drove back to Chicago in a fog of betrayal and disbelief. Upon reaching home, I did something I'd never done before. I blocked all their numbers. No more calls, no more requests for help, no more being taken for granted. If they wanted to make reckless decisions that benefited Amanda and her new husband at my expense, they could do so without my involvement. For the first time in 5 years, when the first of the month came around, I didn't transfer $2,500 to my parents' account. The mortgage was now Amanda and Marcus's problem. In the weeks following that devastating dinner, I wrestled with whether to attend Amanda's wedding. Part of me wanted to wash my hands of the entire situation, to protect myself from further hurt. But another part, the part that remembered teaching Amanda to ride a bike, helping her with homework, and defending her from neighborhood bullies, couldn't imagine not being there on her wedding day, regardless of the circumstances. My closest friend and coworker Jessica listened patiently as I vented my frustration. Whatever you decide, I'll support you, she said. But ask yourself this, years from now, will you regret not being there? Her question resonated with me. Despite everything, these were still my family members. Perhaps attending the wedding would be an opportunity to repair some of the damage, or at least demonstrate that I was better than the pettiness that seemed to have infected our family dynamic. 2 days before the wedding, I booked a flight to Portland and a hotel room. I didn't inform anyone of my plans. I wasn't ready for reconciliation attempts or awkward phone calls. I would simply show up, fulfill my family obligation, and leave. No drama, no confrontations. The wedding was held at Meridian Gardens, an exclusive venue that typically booked 2 years in advance. How Marcus had secured it with only 3 months' notice was a mystery, though I suspected his real estate connections and a substantial deposit had played a role. I arrived just as guests were being seated. The ceremony was even more extravagant than I had anticipated. Ice sculptures, a string quartet, floral arrangements the size of small trees. I estimated the cost at well over $100,000, a staggering sum given my parents' financial situation. My mother spotted me first, her eyes widening in surprise before she hurried over. Brendan, you came, we weren't sure. She attempted to hug me, but I stepped back slightly, maintaining a polite distance. It's Amanda's wedding. Of course I came, I replied evenly. My father approached next, his expression a mixture of relief and wariness. Good to see you, son. There's a seat for you in the front row with us. I nodded, following them to the designated family section, aware of the curious glances from other guests who had probably heard about our falling out. Throughout the ceremony, I maintained a neutral expression, clapping at appropriate moments and standing when required. Amanda looked beautiful in her designer gown, and even I had to admit that she and Marcus made a striking couple. The reception that followed was a showcase of wealth and status. Marcus's family and friends, predominantly from the upper echelons of Portland society, dominated the event. My parents seemed uncomfortable trying too hard to fit in with people who clearly viewed them as outsiders. The most difficult moment came during the gift presentation. My parents had arranged for a symbolic handing over of the house keys, complete with a large photo of the property displayed on an easel. As they presented the keys to Amanda and Marcus, the MC announced Roy and Linda are giving the newlyweds the ultimate gift, the family home where Amanda grew up. Applause erupted from the guests, while Marcus's parents exchanged glances that seemed more calculating than impressed. Marcus himself made a show of being overcome with gratitude, embracing my parents, and declaring how honored he was to be entrusted with their legacy. I remained in my seat sipping champagne and trying to ignore the knowing looks from various relatives who were well aware of my role in keeping that house afloat for the past 5 years. Not one person, including my parents, acknowledged that the gift they were so proudly presenting had been substantially financed by me. After enduring 2 hours of speeches, dances, and increasingly intoxicated celebrations, I decided I'd fulfilled my family obligation. I approached Amanda, offered a brief congratulations, and made my excuses to leave. "You're not staying for the cake cutting?" she asked, a hint of accusation in her tone. "I have an early flight tomorrow," I lied. "I hope you and Marcus are very happy together." She studied my face for a moment. "This is still about the house, isn't it? You know, Brendan, not everything is about money. Some things are about family." The irony of her statement was so profound that I couldn't formulate a response. I simply kissed her cheek, nodded to Marcus, who was watching our exchange from a few feet away, and left the reception without saying goodbye to my parents. The next morning, instead of flying back to Chicago, I drove to my vacation house on the Oregon coast. The small beachfront property had always been my sanctuary, a place where the constant sound of waves helped clear my mind and restore my perspective. I had originally planned to stay for 2 days, but 2 turned into a week as I found myself unable to face returning to my normal life. I extended my leave of absence from work, grateful that my position and years of dedicated service afforded me such flexibility. Jessica texted daily, checking in and updating me on office matters, her steady presence, a reminder that not all relationships were as complicated as family ties. 2 weeks after the wedding, I received an unexpected call from my father's friend Walter, who owned the moving company my parents had hired. "Thought you should know," Walter said gruffly, "that fancy son-in-law of your parents just canceled our services. Said we weren't premium enough for his needs, whatever that means. Hired some outfit from Seattle that charges triple our rates." This puzzled me. For moving what, the wedding gifts? No, for moving your parents out of their house. The new owners, your sister and her husband, want them out by the end of the month. Your parents are scrambling to find somewhere to live. After thanking Walter for the information, I did some research and discovered that my parents had rented a small apartment in downtown Portland, a 1-bedroom unit in a luxury building that cost nearly $3,000 per month, significantly more than their previous mortgage payment that I had been covering. The irony was painful. They had given away a nearly paid-off home to move into an expensive rental they couldn't afford without help. And Marcus, despite his supposed wealth, had pressured them to vacate quickly while spending exorbitantly on moving services. Something didn't add up, but I was determined to stay out of it. They had made their choice, and now they would live with the consequences. Exactly 2 months after Amanda's wedding, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Brendan, it's Mom. I'm calling from my friend Carol's phone since you blocked our numbers." Her voice sounded strained, lacking its usual confidence. I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "We need to talk, sweetheart. Your father and I. We're having some difficulties with the new apartment. It's smaller than we expected, and the noise from downtown is terrible. We can't sleep, and your father's back is acting up from all the stairs." "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied, keeping my tone neutral, "but I'm not sure what that has to do with me." She hesitated before continuing. "We were thinking, your beach house has that extra bedroom, and it's so peaceful there. We thought maybe we could move in for a while just until we figure out something more permanent." The audacity of the request left me momentarily speechless. After giving away the house I'd been paying for, they now expected to move into my vacation property. "That won't be possible," I finally said. "I use that house regularly. But you're in Chicago most of the time. It sits empty for months on end. We wouldn't be in your way. We've always talked about retiring near the ocean, and this would give us a chance to see if coastal living suits us. Mom, I said firmly, you just gave away a house that I paid for, a house that could have been your retirement home, and now you want to move into my property. Do you not see the problem here? That's not fair, Brendan, she protested. We appreciate everything you did to help with the mortgage, but that was a gift. You can't hold that over our heads forever. A gift of $150,000 that you turned around and handed to Amanda and Marcus, I pointed out, a couple who by all accounts didn't need financial assistance. It's more complicated than that, she insisted. Amanda is family. She's starting her own family now. We wanted to give her security. And what about your security? What about the 5 years I spent, ensuring you and Dad wouldn't lose your home? Did that mean nothing to you? My mother's voice hardened. I'm going to put your father on the phone. Maybe you'll listen to reason from him. There was a rustling sound, and then my father's gruff voice came on the line. Son, I know you're upset, but this isn't like you. We raised you to respect family obligations. That's rich, coming from you right now, I replied. What exactly do you think my family obligations are, Dad? To hand over my vacation property after you gave away the house I was paying for. Where does it end? We're your parents, he said, as if that explained everything. We need a place to live that we can afford on our fixed income. The apartment is draining our savings fast. Then perhaps you should have considered the financial implications before giving away your most valuable asset, I suggested. Or you could ask Amanda and Marcus for help. After all, they're the ones benefiting from your generosity. They're newly married, my father protested. They need time to establish themselves. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. Dad Marcus is 35 and supposedly a successful real estate broker. I'm sure he can afford to help his in-laws, especially after receiving a house as a wedding gift. The conversation continued in circles with my parents, alternating between guilt trips, appeals to family loyalty, and increasingly desperate reasoning. Finally, I'd had enough. The answer is no, I stated firmly. I will not be providing you with housing, not now, not in the future. You made a decision that completely disregarded my contributions and feelings. Now you can live with the consequences of that decision. I ended the call blocking Carol's number as well, but the matter wasn't settled. Over the next week, I received calls from various family members, aunts, uncles, cousins, all of whom had apparently been recruited to persuade me to change my mind. Your parents are struggling, my Aunt Patricia scolded. Is this really the time to hold a grudge? Your sister is worried about them, Uncle Robert claimed. She says the apartment is affecting their health. The coordinated pressure campaign only reinforced my decision. I gradually blocked all the extended family numbers, focusing instead on my work and rebuilding the savings I'd depleted helping my parents. 3 weeks after my parents' initial call, I received an email from Amanda. The subject line read, "You should be ashamed." The message itself was a lengthy tirade about my selfishness and lack of family values. Mom and Dad gave you everything growing up, she wrote. They supported your education, celebrated your success, and now when they need help, you turn your back on them. Marcus says we should take legal action for elder abandonment if you continue refusing to help. They're your parents, Brendan. Act like a son. I didn't respond to the email, but the threat of legal action concerned me enough that I consulted with a colleague whose wife specialized in family law. She assured me that elder abandonment wasn't applicable in this situation, especially given my parents' relative youth and good health. They're trying to intimidate you, she explained. Adults aren't legally obligated to provide housing for their parents, particularly parents who are perfectly capable of supporting themselves and have made their own financial decisions. Her reassurance helped, but the situation continued to weigh on me. Jessica noticed my distraction at work and invited me to dinner to talk things through. Over pasta and wine at her apartment, I shared the full story, including the latest developments. What bothers me most, I admitted, isn't the money. It's the complete disregard for what that money represented. Years of sacrifice on my part, putting my own financial goals on hold to help them, and now they act entitled to even more of my resources. Jessica nodded thoughtfully. It sounds like your parents have always favored your sister, perhaps without even realizing it. That pattern is hard to break even when the evidence of unfairness is staring them in the face. Her insight struck a chord. Throughout our childhood, Amanda had always received more leeway, more praise for lesser accomplishments, more attention when we both had achievements to celebrate. I had accepted it as the normal dynamic between siblings, never allowing myself to acknowledge the hurt it caused. "You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm," Jessica added, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand, "especially when they've shown they don't value your sacrifice." Her support strengthened my resolve to maintain boundaries with my family. I focused on work, reconnected with friends I'd neglected while dealing with family drama, and even started exploring the possibility of buying a small rental property as an investment, something I'd put off for years while sending money to my parents. I was finally moving forward when the next bombshell dropped. It was a quiet Tuesday evening. I had just finished a video conference with our international team and was about to order dinner when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a Portland area code, but not a number I recognized. Normally, I would have ignored it, assuming it was another relative trying to guilt me, but something prompted me to answer. "Is this Brendan Mitchell?" a formal voice inquired. "Yes, this is he. This is Officer Daniels with the Portland Police Department. I'm calling regarding a complaint that's been filed against you by Roy and Linda Mitchell." My stomach dropped. "A complaint? What kind of complaint?" "They've alleged that you fraudulently obtained ownership of their home by having them sign documents they didn't understand, and that you're now refusing to transfer the property back to them." For a moment, I was too stunned to respond. Then indignation took over. "That's completely false. I never owned their home. They recently gave it to my sister and her husband as a wedding gift. According to the statement we have, you've been making mortgage payments on the property for several years, leading them to believe you were helping them, when in fact you were arranging for the property to be transferred to your name." I took a deep breath, struggling to maintain my composure. "Officer Daniels, I have documentation proving that I was making those payments as assistance to my parents, not to claim ownership. The property was never in my name. My parents recently transferred ownership to my sister and her husband of their own free will. I had nothing to do with that transaction." There was a pause on the other end. "Do you have evidence to support your statement?" "Yes, I have 5 years of bank statements showing transfers to my parents' account specifically labeled as mortgage assistance. I have text messages and emails discussing these payments as help, not as payments toward ownership. And I'm certain the county recorder's office will show that the property transferred directly from my parents to my sister and her brother-in-law, with my name never appearing on any deed." Officer Daniels's tone softened slightly. "I appreciate your cooperation, Mr. Mitchell. These kinds of family disputes can be complicated. I recommend you gather all your documentation and consider consulting with an attorney." "Am I being charged with something?" I asked, my heart still racing. "No charges have been filed at this point. We're investigating the complaint. But given what you've told me, and if your documentation supports your account, it seems this may be more of a civil matter than a criminal one." After ending the call, I sat in stunned silence. My own parents had filed a false police report against me, accusing me of fraud. The betrayal cut deeper than anything that had come before. This wasn't just about money or favoritism anymore. They were actively trying to damage my reputation and potentially my freedom. I immediately called Thomas Williams, a college friend who had become a respected attorney in Chicago. After explaining the situation, he agreed to represent me. "This is serious," Brendan Thomas warned. "False accusations of fraud could impact your career and reputation even if no charges are ultimately filed. We need to be proactive." Over the next week, I worked with Thomas to compile a comprehensive dossier of evidence, bank statements going back 5 years, all communications with my parents, about the financial arrangements, documentation of the property transfer to Amanda and Marcus, and even testimonials from friends and colleagues who were aware of the assistance I had been providing to my parents. Thomas also advised me to file a counteraction for defamation and filing a false police report. "Sometimes the best defense is a good offense," he explained. "They need to understand there are consequences for making false accusations." While gathering evidence, I discovered something unexpected. In reviewing my parents' social media accounts for any relevant posts, I noticed they had suddenly stopped sharing photos of their new apartment. The last mention of their living situation had been 2 months earlier, with my mother commenting on a friend's post that they were adjusting to apartment living. Out of curiosity, I asked Jessica, who had a friend in Portland real estate, to discreetly check if my parents were still at the luxury apartment they had rented. The information she came back with was surprising. They had moved out after just 1 month, breaking their lease and forfeiting a substantial security deposit. "Where are they living now?" I asked. "According to my friend, they moved in with Amanda and Marcus at your old family home," Jessica replied. "Apparently they're living in the finished basement, which Marcus had renovated into a separate suite." This new information made the false police report even more perplexing. Why would my parents claim I had stolen their house when they were currently living in it with Amanda and Marcus? Something wasn't adding up. Thomas suggested we arrange a formal meeting with all parties involved, my parents, Amanda, Marcus, and their legal representation, if any. "Let's get everyone in a room together and sort this out once and for all," he proposed. "Sometimes when people have to look you in the eye and repeat their accusations, the truth comes out." After some negotiation, a meeting was scheduled at Thomas's office in Chicago. My parents initially objected to the location, claiming they couldn't afford the travel, but eventually agreed when Thomas offered to conduct the meeting via video conference if necessary. Interestingly, once Marcus learned Thomas's reputation as a high-powered attorney, he quickly arranged for everyone to fly to Chicago. The day of the meeting arrived. I sat next to Thomas in the conference room, watching as my family filed in, first my parents looking older and more tired than I remembered. Then Amanda uncharacteristically subdued, and finally Marcus, whose usual confident demeanor seemed forced. They were accompanied by a lawyer who introduced himself as Gregory Pearson, though it became apparent he was a friend of Marcus's rather than an experienced family attorney. Thomas, with his 20 years of experience and commanding presence, quickly established control of the meeting. "We're here today," Thomas began to address serious allegations made against my client, Brendan Mitchell. "Before we proceed, I want to make it clear that we have compiled extensive evidence refuting these claims, and we are prepared to pursue legal action for defamation and filing a false police report if necessary." My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat while my mother stared down at her hands. Marcus leaned forward about to speak, but Thomas held up a hand to stop him. "First, let's establish the facts." Thomas continued, sliding copies of my bank statements across the table. For 5 years, Brendan provided $2,500 monthly to his parents for their mortgage payments. These transfers were clearly labeled as mortgage assistance and totaled approximately $150,000 over that period. He then produced emails and text messages between my parents and me, documenting our understanding of the arrangement. At no point did Brendan claim ownership of the property or attempt to have it transferred to his name. My mother finally looked up, her eyes brimming with tears. "We never meant to imply that Brendan stole our house," she said quietly. "There's been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," Thomas repeated skeptically. "Your statement to the police explicitly accused my client of fraudulently obtaining ownership of your property. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a false accusation." Marcus attempted to intervene. "Look, things got heated. Roy and Linda were upset about Brendan refusing to help them when they needed a place to stay. Emotions ran high." Thomas fixed Marcus with a cold stare. "Mr. Russell, filing a false police report is a criminal offense, not an emotional reaction. And speaking of property matters, I understand you're a real estate broker. Perhaps you can explain why, after receiving the Mitchell family home as a wedding gift, you immediately moved your in-laws into the basement, rather than allowing them to find suitable senior housing." The question clearly caught Marcus off guard. He glanced nervously at his friend-turned-lawyer before responding. "That was a temporary arrangement while they looked for something more permanent. Yet they've been living there for nearly 2 months now, correct? And they broke a lease on a luxury apartment to do so, forfeiting a substantial security deposit. That doesn't sound like a plan for independent living." Amanda suddenly stood up. "This is ridiculous. We're not on trial here. Brendan is the one who abandoned our parents when they needed help." Amanda, I said, speaking directly to her. For the first time, I supported our parents financially for 5 years. I put my own life on hold to ensure they didn't lose their home. Then they gave that home to you and Marcus, without even consulting me, effectively nullifying years of my sacrifice. How exactly am I the one who abandoned them? The room fell silent. My father cleared his throat. Son, we never meant to hurt you. We thought giving the house to your sister was the right thing to do. She was starting a family, and we wanted to provide for her future. And what about my future? I asked quietly. What about the acknowledgement of what I contributed to this family? No one had an answer. Thomas seized the moment to shift the conversation. Let's be clear about what's happening here. My client has documentation proving he never owned or attempted to own the property in question. The county records confirm the property transferred directly from Roy and Linda Mitchell to Amanda and Marcus Russell. The police complaint was demonstrably false. He turned to Gregory Pearson. Unless your clients want to face potential charges for filing a false report, I suggest you advise them to retract their complaint immediately. Additionally, we will require a signed statement acknowledging that Brendan Mitchell never attempted to claim ownership of the property and that the payments he made were legitimate financial assistance. Gregory, clearly out of his depth, nodded quickly. We can arrange that. This has all been a terrible misunderstanding. Marcus, however, wasn't ready to concede. What about the vacation house? Roy and Linda just needed a place to stay temporarily. Brendan's refusal was unnecessarily cruel. I was about to respond when Thomas placed a restraining hand on my arm. Mr. Russell, he said calmly, my client's vacation property is not relevant to these proceedings. Brendan is under no obligation to provide housing for his parents or anyone else. The fact that you're attempting to divert attention to this issue suggests you're avoiding a more significant problem. Thomas leaned forward, his expression intense. Perhaps we should discuss your financial situation, Mr. Russell. My investigation suggests that despite your outward appearance of success, you've been struggling with significant debt. In fact, there's evidence you've been attempting to secure a second mortgage on the Mitchell family home to cover your personal financial obligations. The color drained from Marcus's face. Amanda turned to him, shock evident in her expression. What is he talking about, Marcus? Are we in financial trouble? Marcus attempted to maintain his composure. It's just a cash flow issue. Every business has them. The second mortgage was an investment opportunity, not a necessity. My father stood up abruptly. You told us you were financially secure. That's why we felt comfortable giving you the house, because you were going to provide for Amanda. The meeting descended into chaos as the truth began to emerge. Marcus had been struggling financially for years, maintaining an appearance of wealth through increasingly desperate borrowing. The wedding had been a financial strain, and far from being able to support Amanda in luxury, he had been counting on the equity in my parents' house to bail him out of mounting debt. Amanda, tears streaming down her face, finally admitted she had suspected problems, but had been too afraid to acknowledge them. I wanted to believe everything was perfect, she sobbed. I wanted the fairy tale. My parents sat in stunned silence, the full weight of their decisions finally sinking in. They had given away their most valuable asset to a man who had been lying to everyone, including his new wife. As the meeting concluded, Thomas pulled me aside. You have grounds to pursue legal action against all of them, he said quietly. The false police report, the defamation, the deliberate misrepresentation. Just say the word. I looked at my broken family, my distraught sister, my dejected parents, even Marcus, who now appeared more pathetic than threatening, and shook my head. No more legal action. Let's just make sure the police complaint is withdrawn and get a written acknowledgement about the financial assistance I provided. That's enough. Thomas nodded, respecting my decision. Sometimes knowing you could win is satisfaction enough. In the weeks following that revelatory meeting, my family dynamics underwent a seismic shift. The police complaint was formally withdrawn, and my parents signed a statement acknowledging my financial contributions had been legitimate assistance, not an attempt to claim ownership of their property. More significantly, Amanda separated from Marcus just 3 months after their lavish wedding. The financial deception had been too profound to overcome, especially when combined with his manipulative behavior throughout the entire ordeal. She moved back into the family home, which thankfully remained in her name only despite Marcus's attempts to add his name to the deed, and my parents continued to occupy the basement suite. Marcus, facing mounting debt and the collapse of his carefully constructed facade, relocated to Seattle, presumably to start fresh where his reputation wasn't in tatters. According to the Portland real estate grapevine, he had been exaggerating his success for years, handling only occasional high-end properties while primarily working on much less prestigious listings. One rainy Saturday, about 2 months after the confrontation in Thomas's office, I received an unexpected visit at my Chicago apartment. My parents stood nervously in the hallway, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I remembered. "We should have called first," my mother said hesitantly, "but we were afraid you might refuse to see us." I invited them in, offering coffee and taking their coats. The atmosphere was tense, but not hostile. They had flown to Chicago specifically to speak with me face to face, a gesture that suggested genuine remorse. "We've done a lot of soul-searching," my father began once we were seated in the living room, "and we owe you the most profound apology. Not just for the false accusation, but for years of taking your generosity for granted and failing to acknowledge your sacrifices." My mother wiped away tears. "We got caught up in appearances and status. Marcus made us feel important, connected to a world we'd always admired from a distance. We wanted so badly for Amanda to have opportunities we never had that we overlooked what was right in front of us, a son who had already achieved so much and was selflessly helping us without asking for recognition." Their apology seemed sincere, their regret palpable. After so much anger and hurt, I found myself ready to listen, if not immediately forgive. "What happens now?" I asked. "With the house, with Amanda, with your living situation?" My father explained that Amanda had decided to sell the house once the real estate market improved. "She says she can't live there knowing how it came to be hers. She wants to split the proceeds 3 ways, between herself, us, and you." "I don't want the money," I said immediately. "I didn't help with the mortgage expecting repayment." "We know," my mother said softly. "That's what makes it worse. You gave without expectation, and we took without proper gratitude." They went on to share that Amanda had found a job as an office manager at a local accounting firm, her first stable employment in years. The experience with Marcus had been a harsh but effective wake-up call, pushing her to develop independence and responsibility she'd previously avoided. As for their living arrangement, they were planning to find a modest condo once the house sold. "Something we can actually afford on our retirement income," my father said with newfound pragmatism. "No more living beyond our means or depending on our children to bail us out." Their humility and self-awareness touched me. While the wounds were still fresh, I could see they were genuinely trying to make amends and learn from their mistakes. "I have a proposition," I said after considering their situation. "I've been looking at investment properties in Chicago. There's a duplex not far from here that I'm considering purchasing. If I buy it, would you consider relocating to Chicago? You could live in one unit paying a fair but affordable rent, and I'd rent out the other unit at market rate. It would be a good investment for me, and you'd have stable housing near family." The offer surprised them. "You'd still want us close by?" After everything, my mother asked incredulously. "We're family," I replied simply. "That doesn't stop because of mistakes, even serious ones. But moving forward, we need honesty, boundaries, and mutual respect." They accepted tearfully, expressing both gratitude for the second chance and shame for having necessitated it in the first place. 3 months later, they moved into the duplex I had purchased. The arrangement worked better than any of us had anticipated. Having their own space while being close enough for regular dinners and visits provided the perfect balance of independence and family connection. Amanda eventually sold the house, using her portion of the proceeds to fund her return to college, completing the business degree she had abandoned years ago. She and I rebuilt our relationship, gradually finding common ground in our shared experience of growing beyond the dysfunctional patterns of our upbringing. As for me, the ordeal forced me to confront issues I had long suppressed: my willingness to be taken for granted, my tendency to enable unhealthy family dynamics through financial support without accountability, and my reluctance to establish clear boundaries. Jessica proved invaluable throughout my journey of self-discovery and healing. Our friendship deepened through long conversations about family responsibility and self-worth. Eventually, that friendship blossomed into something more, and a year after the family crisis, we began dating. Looking back on that painful chapter of my life, I realize it wasn't really about the house or even the money. It was about recognition, respect, and reciprocity, the fundamental elements of any healthy relationship. My parents' betrayal hurt so deeply because it demonstrated a fundamental lack of those elements. The experience taught me that true family isn't defined by unconditional sacrifice, but by mutual respect and appreciation. It's possible to love your family deeply while still maintaining healthy boundaries and expecting basic consideration in return. Today, our family dynamics are healthier than they've ever been. My parents have developed financial independence appropriate for their stage of life. Amanda has found purpose and self-sufficiency through education and meaningful work. And I've learned that generosity means nothing without the self-respect to ensure it's properly valued. If you're struggling with family expectations, remember that love doesn't require martyrdom. Healthy relationships involve give and take, appreciation, and respect. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for others, is to stand firm in your worth and refuse to be taken for granted. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. Have you ever experienced family members taking your generosity for granted? How did you handle it? Please share in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. Thank you for listening, and remember, you can be both generous and respected. You deserve both.